Welcome to Damon Revenge Stories. Get ready for tales of sweet revenge.
My name is Magnus Kerr. I'm 43 years old. On a Tuesday morning in April, I stood at a job site in Naperville, Illinois, holding a 3-ring binder that weighed 4 pounds and contained 9 years of my life reduced to evidence. 40 workers stood behind me in hard hats and steel-toed boots. My father-in-law Roman pulled up in his black Silverado with my brother-in-law Derek in the passenger seat, both of them smiling because they thought this was a celebration. Roman stepped out of the truck, opened his arms wide like he was greeting a son, and I watched the exact moment his eyes moved past me to the man standing at my left. A man Roman hadn't seen in 14 years. A man Roman had told me was a thief and a liar. And Roman's arms dropped to his sides like someone had cut the strings. That was the moment he knew, but he didn't know everything yet. He didn't know about the binder. He didn't know about the voicemail. He didn't know that the state licensing board investigator standing quietly near the portable office had already opened a case file with his name on it. And he certainly didn't know that his daughter, my wife Tessa, was sitting in our kitchen in Schaumburg at that very moment, listening to his own voice on a recording that would end the version of her father she'd believed in for her entire life. I need to tell you how I got here. Every step, every document, every lie I swallowed, and every truth I dug up with my own hands. But to understand any of it, you need to understand what Roman Volkov's family meant to a man whose own father walked out when he was 12. Welcome back to this channel. If you've ever given someone everything you had because they promised you were family, and then found out you were just labor with a title, this story is going to land somewhere deep. We tell stories here about people who discover the truth and find the courage to use it. If this one resonates, hit subscribe and drop a comment. Tell me if you've ever had someone use the word someday to keep you working while they built something you'd never own. Now, let me take you back 14 years to the summer I married Tessa Volkov and made the decision that shaped everything that followed. I met Tessa at a structural engineering conference in Rosemont, of all places. She was working a vendor booth for her father's company, Volkov Construction Group, handing out branded pens and brochures with her father's face on them. I was 29, 2 years out of grad school, working for a mid-sized firm downtown, and studying for my PE license on the weekends. She was 27, dark-haired, sharp-tongued, funny in a way that snuck up on you. We talked for 40 minutes at that booth, while the rest of the Conbas pursuers. Silence moved around us like water around a rock. By the third date, I'd met her father. By the sixth, Roman was calling me son. You have to understand what that word did to me. My father left on a Thursday in November when I was 12. No note, no call, no forwarding address. My mother raised me and my sister on a receptionist's salary in a 2-bedroom apartment in Des Plaines. I put myself through all Sabatro Fauzar Kofsambaur Dar Ariter Slaro Jachezefer So Asur grad school. I earned my professional engineer license at 28, passed on the first attempt, which I say not to brag, but because you need to understand that I have never in my life been given anything. Everything I have, I built with my own 2 hands and my own mind. So, when Roman Volkov, this big-voiced, barrel-chested man with calloused hands and a company with his name on the door, put his arm around my shoulder at a Sunday dinner and said, "Magnus, you're the son I wish I'd had," I didn't just hear the words. I felt the hole in my chest that had been open since I was 12 start to close. Tessa and I married in June of that year. Small ceremony, reception at a banquet hall in Schaumburg. Roman gave a toast that made half the room cry. He said, "I'm not losing a daughter. I'm gaining the man who's going to carry this family forward. 3 days before the wedding, I'd received a formal offer from Henderson and Park, a downtown structural engineering firm. $96,000 a year, full benefits, clear partnership track. I showed the letter to Roman over beers in his garage. He read it, set it down, looked me in the eye, and said, "Family takes care of family. This company will be yours someday, Magnus. Not in 30 years. Someday soon. Why would you go work for strangers when you can bow Sakander Burbal Sozen Sam and yes shows word cheese offer show her own blood." He had 12 employees at that time. 12. The office was a double-wide trailer on a lot in Elk Grove Village. The books were a mess. The bidding process was something Roman did on gut instinct and a handshake, and they hadn't won a municipal contract in 3 years. I saw all of that, but I also saw Roman's hand on my shoulder, and I heard the word son, and I made my choice. I turned down the $96,000. Tessa hugged me and said, "Dad's going to take care of us." I started at Volkov Construction the Monday after our honeymoon, at a salary of $52,000, less than I'd been making at my previous firm. But I wasn't there for the salary. I was there for the promise. The first year I rebuilt everything. I redesigned the entire bidding process. Roman's approach had been to lowball on price and hope for change orders, a strategy that works until it doesn't. And it hadn't been working. I built a system, accurate cost modeling, risk-adjusted margins, proper scope documentation. Within 8 months, we landed a $1.2 million municipal contract with the Village of Hoffman Estates, the same contract Roman had failed to win 3 consecutive years. The village board told me directly that our proposal was the most professional submission they'd received from a local contractor. I remember the night we got the call. Roman opened a bottle of something expensive in the trailer office, poured 2 glasses, and said, "Magnus, you saved this family." Saved this. At Thanksgiving that year, Roman stood at the head of the table, Tessa's mother, Gloria on his right, Tessa on his left, me across from him, Derek still in college somewhere downstate. And he raised his glass and told the whole family that Magnus Kerr had saved Volkov Construction. Gloria squeezed my hand under the table. Tessa's eyes were wet. I felt, for the first time since I was 12 years old, like I belonged to something real. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't know for 8 more years, was that Roman filed that $1.2 million municipal contract under his own LLC, not Volkov Construction Group, a separate entity called RV Holdings LLC that I wasn't a party to, wasn't a member of, and had never seen the paperwork for. The contract I won, the system I built, the revenue I generated, it flowed into a box with Roman's name on it, and no window for me to look through. That was year 1. By year 3, Volkov Construction had grown from 12 employees to 31. I was running engineering, operations, client relations, and half the project management. My PE license was on every permit application. My name was on every structural certification. When clients called, they asked for Magnus. When inspectors came to a job site, they looked for Magnus. Roman handled the money, the banking, the entity paperwork, what he called the business side. Itu, I handled everything that made the business exist. In year 3, I asked Roman about the business registration. He'd promised multiple times that I would be added as a partner. Equity ownership, my name on the LLC filing. I'd asked casually at first, then more directly. At a Sunday dinner in March, I brought it up at the table, which I later realized was a mistake because Roman was a man who performed best with an audience. He laughed, shook his head, and said, "Lawyers are slow, you know how it is. These things take time. But it's happening, Magnus. I gave you my word, his word. I believed it. I want you to understand that I wasn't stupid for believing it. I was a man who had spent his entire adult life earning everything. And when the one person who'd offered me a family also offered me a future, I believed him because I needed to believe him. That need was the crack in my foundation. And Roman knew exactly where it was. Our first son, Caleb, was born in year 2. Our second, Owen, in year 5. I was working 60-hour weeks, sometimes 70. Tessa handled the boys during the day, and I handled them at night when I could. Roman started talking about building a house for us on a lot he owned in Bartlett. The family compound, he called it. It never happened. The lot, I would later discover, was transferred to Derek's name in year 4. By year 5, the company had 48 employees. I had personally managed the engineering on every major project. My PE license, my professional engineer license, the credential I'd earned through years of education and examination and continuing education, was being used on permit applications across 3 counties. I knew about some of them. I authorized some of them. But in year 5, something happened that I should have caught and didn't, because I was too tired and too trusting and too deep inside the machine to see the machine clearly. Roman began billing clients a $185 permit processing fee on every project that required my PE stamp. This was a fee for using my credential, my license, my professional liability, my name on a legal document. Over the course of years, 5 through 9, my PE license appeared on 34 permit applications that I was directly aware of and personally supervised. But the actual number, which I wouldn't discover until much later, was 112. 112 permit applications bearing my professional engineer license number, submitted across Cook County, DuPage County, and Will County. At $185 per application, billed to clients, that's $20,720 in fees generated by my credential alone. And that's just the fee markup. The projects those permits enabled were worth millions. I never saw $1 of the permit fees. I never knew they were being charged. Every one of those unauthorized permit applications was a violation of Illinois professional engineer licensing regulations. Everyone put my license at risk. Everyone was a document with my name on it that I hadn't reviewed, hadn't approved, and didn't know existed. Roman was building his empire on my credentials, while I thought I was building mine. But I didn't know that yet. In year 5, what I knew was that I was tired, that my boys were growing up faster than I was watching, and that the promise of ownership felt further away, not closer. What I told myself was, be patient. Roman is old school. He does things his way, on his timeline. The company is growing. The promise is real. Someday, that word. I carried it like a stone in my chest for 9 years. Year 7 is when the architecture of the lie became visible, though I didn't recognize it as architecture at the time. I recognized it as an annoyance. Roman's younger son, Derek, 28 years old, 0 construction experience, 0 engineering education, 0 days on a job site, walked into the office on a Monday morning with a new title, Vice President of Operations. My title was Senior Engineer and Director of Project Management. I ran operations. I had run operations for 7 years. Derek's only qualification was his last name. Roman pulled me aside and said, Derek needs to learn the business. He's family, Magnus. Just mentor him. Show him how you do things. He'll handle the admin side. You keep doing what you do best. I looked at Roman's face when he said this, and I saw something I couldn't name at the time, but recognized later. The careful blankness of a man who is executing a plan and doesn't want you to see it. I mentored Derek. I showed him the bidding process I'd built, the client management system, the project tracking tools. Derek nodded, took notes in a leather journal Roman bought him, and asked questions that revealed he didn't understand the difference between a load-bearing wall and a partition wall. But he smiled a lot. He brought donuts to the office on Fridays. The workers liked him because he never asked them to do anything difficult. Roman started bringing Derek to client dinners I wasn't invited to. 3 months later, I'd understand why Derek smiled when I trained him. He wasn't learning how to run the business. He was learning how to look like he ran the business for when they pushed me out. Year 8. This is the year the cracks became fractures. But I still didn't let myself see the pattern. My son Caleb, 11 years old, made the starting lineup for his school's basketball team. The championship game was on a Saturday in February. I had it on my calendar. I'd promised Caleb I'd be there. On Thursday, Roman called me. Not texted, called, which meant it was serious, and told me the Aurora commercial project was in trouble. The $3 million renovation of a retail complex on the east side. The general contractor had botched the foundation work, and the structural engineer of record, me, needed to be on site immediately to assess whether the entire west wall needed to be reshored. Roman said, "This can't wait, Magnus. If we lose this project, we lose the client, and that client is worth $2 million a year to us." I drove to Aurora at 6 a.m. on Saturday. I missed Caleb's championship game. Tessa took a video and texted it to me. Caleb scoring the winning layup, looking up into the stands, scanning for my face. I watched that video in my truck, in an Aurora parking lot, and I cried for the first time in years. Not because of the game, because I realized I had become the man my father was, absent when it mattered, except I hadn't chosen to leave. I'd been pulled away by the same promise that was supposed to make me a better father than mine ever was. That same night, the night I spent in Aurora saving Roman's project, Roman took Derek to a Bears game. Tessa told me casually on Sunday. Dad and Derek went to the Bears game last night. Derek posted pictures. Roman didn't go to the client celebration dinner the following week, when the Aurora project was saved. He sent Derek with a card that said, "Great job, team." My name wasn't on the card. I want to stop here and tell you about a napkin. It's a small thing, a cocktail napkin from the first Sunday dinner I ever attended at the Volkov house, back before Tessa and I were married. Roman had been drinking wine. He was expansive and warm, and at the end of the meal he pulled a pen from his shirt pocket and wrote on the napkin, "To Magnus, future owner." He wrote the date underneath. He wrote his initials. He slid it across the table and said, "Keep that. Someday you'll frame it." I kept it in my wallet for 9 years. Not framed. Folded into a small square and tucked behind my driver's license. I touched it sometimes like a talisman. On bad days, on days when the promise felt distant, I'd feel the edge of that napkin against my fingertip and remind myself, he wrote it down. He meant it. It's coming. Year 9. Easter dinner at the Volkov house. Gloria cooked lamb, which she did every year, and the table was crowded. Tessa, me, the boys, Derek and his girlfriend, Roman at the head, Gloria at the foot. Gloria reached over and patted my hand during the meal and said, "You work too hard, honey." Roman always says, "You're irreplaceable." Irreplaceable. That word would turn to acid in my mouth within weeks. During that dinner, I went to the kitchen to refill my water glass and passed the hallway that led to Roman's study. The door was open a few inches. Through the gap, I could see Roman and Derek standing at the desk, bent over paperwork, whispering. Derek had a pen in his hand. Roman was pointing at something on the page. When Roman heard my footstep in the hallway, he looked up, and in the half second before he arranged his face, I saw something cold and calculating that I had never seen directed at me before. Then the mask came back. The warmth, the big smile. "Magnus, come have some more wine. Leave the water, it's Easter." I went back to the table. My chest was tight. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself they were probably looking at vendor invoices, that Derek was learning the business, that Roman's expression was just concentration, not conspiracy. I told myself all of this. And some part of me, the part that had spent 20 years reading structural loads and stress fractures. Knew I was lying to myself. The following week, Roman called me into the trailer office. He was unusually warm, almost nervous, which was not a state I associated with Roman Volkov. He poured coffee, asked about the boys, complimented my work on the Aurora project. Then he said, "I need a favor. Magnus. A formality. The company needs a new equipment loan. $400,000 for excavators and a new crane. The bank needs a cosigner. It's just paperwork. I'll have it paid off in 18 months. A formality. Just paperwork." These are phrases that Roman used the way other people use please and thank you. Reflexively, without meaning. But something had shifted in me at that Easter dinner. Something in the hallway. Something in the half second of Roman's unguarded face. So, instead of signing where Roman's finger pointed, I did something I hadn't done in 9 years of working for this man. I read every page. The loan documents were 46 pages long. Standard commercial lending agreement, equipment as primary collateral, personal guarantees as secondary. I read them in the trailer office while Roman made phone calls in the other room. And on page 31, I found the collateral schedule. The loan was secured not only against the equipment being purchased, but also against a property, a commercial lot on Higgins Road in Schaumburg, listed under the name of an entity called DR, Volkov Holdings. LC, DR, Volkov Holdings. D for Derek, R for Roman. An LLC I'd never heard of, owning a property I had never known existed, used as collateral for a loan I was being asked to personally guarantee. My hands did something my mind hadn't authorized. They started shaking. Not visible tremors. Small ones, the kind you feel in the tendons of your fingers and the joints of your thumbs. I set the papers down on the desk very carefully, aligning the edges, and I breathed through my nose, the way I breathe when I'm standing on a beam, 40 feet above a foundation, and the wind picks up. Controlled, deliberate, in and out. I didn't sign the loan. I told Roman I needed to review it with my own attorney, which was a lie. I didn't have an attorney. Roman's face did something complicated. The warmth flickered. Something colder moved behind his eyes. Then the mask resettled and he said, "Of course. Take your time. Family trusts family." That night, I sat in my truck in the driveway for 20 minutes before going inside. Tessa texted me, "Dinner's getting cold." I texted back, "Be right in." I stared at the garage door and felt the architecture of my life shift beneath me like a foundation settling on bad soil. One detail, one LLC, one name that shouldn't have been there. And suddenly, the hallway at Easter, the whispering over paperwork, Derek's VP title, the Bears game, the missing equity promise, the years of lawyers are slow, all of it rearranged itself into a pattern I'd been refusing to see. I went inside. I ate dinner. I helped Owen with his math homework. I read Caleb a chapter of the book we were working through. I kissed Tessa goodnight, and then I lay in the dark, with my eyes open and my mind, doing what it was trained to do. Analyzing load paths, tracing stress concentrations, identifying the point of failure in a structure that looked sound from the outside, but was rotting from within. I started my investigation the next morning, not with anger, not with grief, with the systematic precision of a licensed structural engineer examining a building he suspects is compromised. You don't swing a hammer at a cracked beam. You document, you measure, you test, you build a case that can withstand scrutiny. And then, only then, do you condemn the structure. The first thing I did was pull permit records. This is public information. Any citizen can request permit application records from a county clerk's office. I started with Cook County because that's where most of our projects were. I filed the request online on a Wednesday morning from my truck in the parking lot of a Dunkin' Donuts on Roselle Road. I used my personal email not the company address. I asked for all permit applications filed under my PE license number for the previous 9 years. The response came 4 days later. I opened it on my phone while sitting on the bleachers at Owen's soccer practice. The PDF was 67 pages long. I scrolled through it, and the numbers hit me like a physical weight pressing on my sternum. Cook County alone showed 58 permit applications bearing my PE license number. I had personally authorized and supervised maybe 20 of those. The remaining 38 were projects I had never seen, never reviewed, never set foot on. Someone, Roman, had used my license number on permit applications without my knowledge or consent. My throat closed. I set the phone face down on the metal bleacher and watched Owen chase a soccer ball across the field without seeing him. My PE license. The credential I'd spent years earning. The legal authority that said I, Magnus Kerr, had reviewed and approved the structural adequacy of a building. Roman had been putting my name on buildings I'd never touched. If any of those structures had a failure, a collapse, a crack, an injury, the liability would come to me. My license, my insurance, my freedom, potentially, if someone was hurt. I filed requests with DuPage County and Will County the same night, after the boys were in bed. DuPage came back with 31 applications. Will County had 23. Total across 3 counties, 112 permit applications bearing my professional engineer license number. I had authorized approximately 34. 78 applications were unauthorized. 78 times Roman had forged my professional authority to generate revenue for himself. I sat at the kitchen table at 1 a.m. with the county records printed out and spread in front of me. And I did what structural engineers do. I looked for the pattern. The unauthorized applications clustered around years 5 through 9, with a sharp increase in year 7. Forma sedan seremon tarosne. Somewhere year shiram. Second arrived. Many of them were small residential projects, quick permits, low visibility, the kind of jobs where no one checks whether the engineer of record actually visited the site. Roman had been running a shadow operation, using my credentials as a rubber stamp to multiply his capacity without multiplying his costs. The $185 per permit fee that Roman charged clients, I found invoices for those too, buried in a shared drive folder that Derek had apparently reorganized and mislabeled. 61 invoices at $185 each for PE certification processing. That's $11,285 in fees generated explicitly by the use of my license, paid to Volkov Construction Group. None of it passed through to me, none of it disclosed, but that was only the surface number. Each of those permits enabled a project. Each project generated tens or hundreds of thousands in revenue. My license wasn't just being used. It was the engine of a business expansion I was never told about and never profited from. I called in sick to work for the first time in 9 years. I told Roman I had a stomach bug. His voice on the phone was warm, concerned. Take care of yourself, son. We need you healthy. I spent the day at the Schaumburg Public Library using their computer to search the Illinois Secretary of State's business database. I found Volkov Construction Group, LLC. Roman is sole member. I found RV Holdings, LLC. Roman is sole member. I found DR, Volkov Holdings, LLC. Derek and Roman as co-members, formed in year 4. And then I found a 4th entity I'd never heard of. Volkov Legacy Partners, LLC, formed 7 months ago, listing Derek Volkov as sole member and manager, with a registered agent address that matched the Higgins Road property from the loan documents. 4 LLCs. None of them included my name. The company I had built from 12 employees to what was now 94 people, the company that existed because of my engineering, my bidding system, my client relationships, my license, was structured as a constellation of entities designed to funnel everything of value away from me and toward Roman and Derek. I drove home from the library and sat in the driveway again. My phone buzzed with a text from Tessa. Dad says feel better. He's bringing soup tomorrow. I stared at that text for a long time. Roman was bringing me soup. The man who was systematically stealing my professional identity, my labor, and my future was bringing me soup because I'd called in sick, and his daughter, my wife, thought this was love. I needed help. I needed someone who understood what I was looking at. Someone with distance and clarity. Someone who wouldn't tell me I was overreacting. I thought about calling a lawyer, and I would. But first I needed something else. I needed to talk to someone who understood Roman. If you're listening to this and your name is on something you didn't authorize, if someone is using your credentials or your work to build something that has no room for you, and they keep telling you to be patient, to trust the process, to wait for someday, check the paperwork. Right now. Tonight. Because someday is the most expensive word in the English language, and I paid 9 years for mine. The LinkedIn message came on a Thursday. I almost didn't open it. The name, Sal Vecchio, triggered an immediate reaction, a kind of reflexive hostility that had been programmed into me by years of Roman stories. Sal Vecchio was, according to Roman, a backstabbing thief. Roman's former business partner from before I joined the company. A man who had tried to steal the company, who had been caught cooking the books, who was essentially, in Roman's telling, the villain of Volkov Construction's origin story. I built this company twice, Roman used to say. Once with Sal, and he nearly destroyed it. Then again with you, Magnus, and this time it's right. The LinkedIn message was 3 sentences. Magnus, you don't know me, but I know what's happening to you. Roman did the same thing to me in 2009. If you want to talk, call this number. My first instinct was to delete it. My second instinct, the one born from 78 unauthorized permit applications and 4 LLCs with no room for my name, was to call. I met Sal Vecchio at a diner in Elmhurst on a Saturday morning. Tessa thought I was getting the oil changed. Sal was 61, gray-haired, thick through the shoulders, with the hands of a man who'd spent decades on construction sites. He brought a manila folder. Roman told you I was a thief, Sal said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Sal opened the folder. Inside were documents from 2009, an LLC filing showing Sal as a 50% partner in the original Volkov Construction, bank statements showing systematic transfers from the company account to Roman's personal account, a letter from Sal's attorney demanding an accounting, and Roman's response, a countersuit alleging theft, filed 3 days after Sal's demand, designed to bury Sal in legal costs and force a settlement. I wasn't the thief, Sal said. I was the last guy. Before you. He told me the story. Sal and Roman had been partners for 6 years. Sal ran the field operations. Roman ran the money. Sound familiar? When the company became profitable, Roman started siphoning. When Sal caught it, Roman filed a preemptive lawsuit, told everyone in the industry that Sal was a crook, and used the legal pressure to force Sal out of the partnership at a fraction of its value. Sal spent 3 years and $140,000 in legal fees fighting it before he settled. He lost his reputation. He lost his business relationships. He started over as a subcontractor working out of his garage. He doesn't change the playbook, Sal said. He doesn't need to. It works every time. Find someone who's good at the work, promise them the world, use them until they've built something valuable, then restructure and push them out. Sal looked at me across the table. The question is whether you're going to let him finish the play. I asked Sal if he'd be willing to share his documentation formally. He said, Magnus, I've been waiting 14 years for someone to ask me that. Sal became my ally. Not just emotionally, strategically. He knew Roman's patterns, his legal tactics, his financial structures. He knew how Roman moved money, how he created entities, how he used family loyalty as a shield. Sal was the map to a territory I was only beginning to explore. But Sal also did something harder. He held me back. I wanted to confront Roman. Every day I walked into that trailer office and looked at Roman's face and heard him call me son, I wanted to throw the county records on his desk and watch him choke on them. Sal said, "No, you're not ready. He's done this before. If you go in half-loaded, he'll turn it around, he'll cry, he'll apologize, he'll blame Derek, he'll promise it was a mistake, and he'll fix it. And your wife will believe him because he's her father. And you'll be back at square one with less leverage than you have now." Sal was right. So I waited, and I gathered, and I lived the masquerade. The masquerade. That's the word for what comes next, and it's the part of this story that cost me the most. Not in money or time, but in something I don't have a precise word for. Integrity, maybe, or sanity. For 6 weeks, I knew the full truth about Roman Volkov, and I sat across from him at Sunday dinners and called him Roman, and passed the bread and laughed at his jokes and let him hug me goodbye, while inside my body every cell was screaming. The first Sunday dinner after the Sal meeting was the worst. Gloria made pot roast. Roman was in a good mood. The Naperville contract was progressing ahead of schedule, which meant ahead of my schedule because I was managing it. He raised his glass at the table and said, "To the best son-in-law a man could ask for." I raised my glass. I smiled. I drank. The wine tasted like metal. Tessa squeezed my knee under the table, and I had to concentrate on not flinching because her touch, this woman I loved, this woman who didn't know what her father was, felt like a circuit closing on exposed wire. That night in bed, Tessa said, "You've been quiet." I said, "Long week." She said, "Dad worries about you. He says you seem stressed." I stared at the ceiling and felt something in my chest that was either rage or grief, and I couldn't tell the difference. "I'm fine," I said. "Just tired." The following week, a Wednesday, I was at the trailer office going over the Naperville project timeline. Roman was on a phone call in the next room. I could hear his voice through the thin wall. He was talking to Derek. I recognized the cadence, the way Roman's voice dropped into a conspiratorial register that he used only with his son. I held my breath and listened. The Naperville job closes in April," Roman said. "Once Magnus signs off on the final inspection, we restructure. He's done all the heavy lifting." There was a pause while Derek said something I couldn't make out. Then Roman laughed and said something in a lower voice that I caught only fragments of. Something about the new LLC. Something about licensing transfer. I sat at my desk with my hands flat on the surface, and my jaw clenched so hard I could feel my molars flexing in their sockets. I breathed through my nose. I counted to 10. Then I counted to 10 again. Then I opened my email and typed a project update to the Naperville general contractor with hands that were perfectly steady because I had decided, in that moment, that my body would obey me and not the earthquake happening inside it. The almost caught moment came 2 weeks later. Roman and I were walking a job site in Palatine, just the two of us, reviewing a foundation pour that had cured overnight. Roman was in a reflective mood. He said, "You know, Magnus, I've been thinking about the future, about what this company looks like in 5-10 years. I said nothing. He glanced at me. A sharp, quick look. More assessment than affection. "You seem different lately," he said. "Everything okay at home?" My heart rate spiked. I could feel it in my throat. I said, "Caleb's been having trouble in school. Math. I've been up late helping him." This was partially true. Caleb was struggling with fractions, and I had been staying up. But not for that reason. Roman nodded slowly. He was studying me. I could feel the weight of his attention the way you feel a structural load on a beam. Not visible, but measurable. "If something's bothering you," Roman said, "you'd tell me, right? That's what family does." "Of course," I said. "Family takes care of family." I watched his face when I said those words. His own words, the words he'd used to recruit me 14 years ago. And for one fraction of a second, something moved across his features. Not guilt. Recognition. He heard his own language coming back to him, and it registered, somewhere deep, that the words might be a mirror instead of a commitment. Then it passed. He clapped me on the shoulder and said, "That's my boy." I went to my truck after that site visit and sat with my hands on the steering wheel and shook. Full-body tremors, the kind that come when adrenaline has been suppressed for too long, and the body finally lets go. I shook for 2 full minutes. Then I called Sal. "He's suspicious," I said. "Then we move faster," Sal said. "What's your timeline?" "The Naperville inspection is in 3 weeks. Then that's when you do it. At the site, on his ground, in front of everyone he's been lying to." Tessa found the voicemail on a Tuesday. I was at the Naperville site doing a pre-inspection walkthrough. My phone rang, and it was Tessa. And when I answered, there was a silence that I recognized immediately. The silence of a person whose reality has just been rearranged. She'd been using the family iPad to look up a recipe, and a notification had popped up from Roman's synced voicemail. Roman had set up the iPad years ago and apparently forgot it was linked to his phone. The voicemail was from Roman to Derek, and Tessa played it twice. The second time, she was standing up. "Let Magnus keep grinding," Roman's voice said on the recording. "We'll transfer everything once he finishes the Naperville contract, then cut him loose. The dumb gringo did all the work for us." Tessa played it for me over the phone. I pulled over to the shoulder of Route 59 and listened. Roman's voice was casual, almost cheerful. "The dumb gringo." 14 years of marriage to his daughter, 2 grandchildren, 9 years of my professional life. "The dumb gringo did all the work for us." Tessa was crying, not the soft crying of sadness, the jagged, ugly crying of a person whose foundation has cracked. "Magnus," she said. "Magnus, I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know." "I know you didn't," I said, and I meant it. Tessa was not part of this. Tessa was another person Roman had lied to, another person living inside the architecture of his deception without knowing the walls were hollow. I told Tessa everything that night after the boys were in bed. The LLCs, the unauthorized permits, the Salvecchio connection, the loan documents. I showed her the county records, all 67 pages from Cook County, the 31 from DuPage, the 23 from Will. I watched her face move through the same progression mine had: denial, confusion, resistance, horror, anger. She held the printed voicemail transcript in her hand and read the words, "the dumb gringo," 3 times, and each time her jaw set harder. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I'm going to end it at the Naperville site, in front of everyone." Tessa was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I want to hear it when it happens. I want to hear every word." The final weeks of preparation had the quality of a countdown. Every day brought the Naperville inspection closer, and every day I added something to the binder. The binder was a standard 3-ring, black, 2 inches thick. I organized it with tabbed dividers, each section labeled in my own handwriting. Section 1, the promise, the emails, the texts, the handwritten napkin. Section 2, the LLCs, entity filings from the Secretary of State showing the formation dates, the members, the absence of my name. Section 3, the permits. 112 applications, with the unauthorized ones highlighted in yellow. Section 4, the financial records, the 185 or permit fees, the contract filed under RV Holdings, the shadow property on Higgins Road. Section 5, the Salvecchio file, his original partnership, documents, the bank records showing Roman siphoning, the timeline of his expulsion. Section 6, the voicemail transcript and audio file on a USB drive. I kept the binder in a locked cabinet in my truck. At night, I brought it inside and kept it in the garage, behind a stack of Owen's outgrown bicycle helmets. Tessa knew where it was. No one else did. Roman came to Sunday dinner the week before the scheduled inspection with gifts. A bottle of wine for me, a cashmere scarf for Tessa, Bears jerseys for the boys. He was expansive, affectionate, almost aggressively warm. He pulled me into a hug at the door and held it for a beat too long. His cologne, the same brand he'd worn for as long as I'd known him, filled my nose, and for a disorienting moment I was back in year one, back in the trailer office, back in the world where Roman was the father I'd never had, and the promise was real. "I'm proud of you, Magnus," he said at the dinner table that night. "This Naperville project, it's your masterpiece. When it's done, we're going to sit down and talk about the future, the real future, your future." I looked at him across the table. The same table where he'd written on that napkin 9 years ago. The same chair he sat in every Sunday. The same warm, confident face. And I felt something I hadn't expected. A pulse of grief so deep, it almost knocked the plan out of me. Because in that moment, the part of me that was still 12 years old and desperate for a father wanted the lie to be true, wanted Roman to mean it, wanted someday to arrive and make everything I'd discovered wrong. Then Roman's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it and I saw the screen, a text from Derek. Roman tilted the phone away from me. A small movement, automatic, practiced. The movement of a man who has been hiding things for so long, it's become muscle memory. The grief died. The resolve finalized. 3 days before the inspection, I contacted the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation, the agency that oversees professional engineer licenses in the state. I spoke with an investigator named Karen Oshiro. I explained the situation. My PE license used on 78 permit applications without my authorization. Projects I had never reviewed, structural certifications bearing my name on buildings I'd never set foot in. Karen was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "How long has this been happening?" "At least 5 years," I said. "Possibly longer." "Mr. Kerr, this is serious. Unauthorized use of a PE license is a violation that can result in suspension of the contractor's license, civil penalties, and potential criminal referral. I need to see the documentation." I sent her the Cook County, DuPage County, and Will County records that afternoon. I also sent her the financial records showing the per-permit billing. Karen called me back the next day and said she would be at the Naperville site for the inspection walkthrough. She didn't say why specifically, but we both understood. The morning of the Naperville walkthrough, April. The sky was flat and white, the kind of Illinois spring sky that looks like a sheet hung over the world. The site was a commercial development on the south side of town. 4 buildings, mixed retail and office. $2.3 million project, the biggest in the company's active portfolio. The concrete was cured. The steel was up. The framing was nearly complete. It was genuinely a beautiful piece of work, and every structural calculation behind it was mine. I arrived at 6:30 in the morning, 90 minutes before anyone else. I opened the portable site office and laid out the binder on the folding table inside. I tested the Bluetooth speak, but I said it brought a small black cylinder, the kind you'd use for music at a backyard barbecue. I paired it with my phone and played a few seconds of a podcast to check the volume. Then I queued up the voicemail. Sal arrived at 7. He was wearing khakis and a windbreaker, and he looked like what he was, a 61-year-old man who had been carrying a 14-year grudge and was about to see it validated. We shook hands. He looked at the binder on the table and said, "That's one hell of a closing argument. Karen Oshiro from the state board arrived at 7:15. She was calm, professional, carrying a leather portfolio. She introduced herself to Sal without explaining her role and took a position near the portable office. The workers began arriving at 7:30. I had called a meeting for 8 o'clock, told them it was about new employment contracts, which was technically true. By 7:50, there were 40 men and women in hard hats and vests, standing in a loose semicircle near the main building. They were talking, drinking coffee, checking their phones. They didn't know what was coming. Neither did Roman. Roman's black Silverado pulled into the lot at 8:02. Derek was in the passenger seat. They were both smiling. Roman was wearing his good jacket, the leather one he wore to client meetings and celebrations. He got out of the truck and spread his arms and said, loud enough for the workers to hear, "There he is, the man of the hour. Magnus, this is your day." He walked toward me with that big Roman stride, that confident proprietary walk, and then he saw Sal Vicchio standing to my left, and the stride broke. It was subtle. A half-step hesitation, a recalculation happening behind his eyes. His arms, which had been open for the embrace, lowered to his sides. His smile lost its warmth and became something mechanical, something maintained rather than felt. "What's Sal doing here?" Roman said. His voice was lower now. He'd shifted from the public Roman to the private one. "Sal's here because he was the first person you did this to," I said. "I'm the second. There isn't going to be a third." Roman's face moved through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, calculation, and the first flicker of genuine fear. Derek, who had come around the truck and was standing slightly behind his father, went very still. "Magnus, I don't know what you think is—" "I think you should sit down," I said. "This is going to take a while." I picked up the binder from the table in the portable office and carried it outside. The workers had gone quiet. 40 people who had built this site with their hands, who had taken direction from me for months, who had cashed paychecks from Volkov Construction Group without knowing the structure beneath it. They watched me set the binder on a stack of lumber and open it to the first tab. I pulled out the napkin. The cocktail napkin from 9 years ago, yellowed and soft from being folded in my wallet for 3,000 days. To Magnus, future owner. Roman's initials, the date. I held it up so Roman could see it. I didn't hold it up for the workers. I held it up for him. "You wrote this at your first Sunday dinner with me," I said. "Future owner. Do you remember?" Roman's face was doing something I'd never seen. The muscles around his mouth were pulling in 2 directions, trying to smile, trying to set. His eyes were moving between the napkin, my face, the workers, Derek, Karen Oshiro. He was calculating exits. I could see it happening in real time, the way I can see load paths in a structure, the forces seeking equilibrium. "Magnus," he said, "son, whatever this is, we can talk about it privately." We're past private," I said. I turned to the first tab section. "These are emails from you to me over the past 9 years. 17 emails in which you explicitly promised me equity ownership in the company." I read the first one aloud. It was from year 2, response to my question about the partnership timeline. "Don't worry, Magnus, these things take time. Your family. The company is being built for both of us." Roman's jaw worked. That was the intention. Things got complicated with the legal structure. I turned to the second tab. "These are the entity filings from the Illinois Secretary of State. Volkov Construction Group LLC, Roman Volkov, sole member. RV Holdings, LLC, Roman Volkov, sole member. DR, Volkov Holdings, LLC, Derek Volkov and Roman Volkov, co-members. Volkov Legacy Partners, LLC, Derek Volkov, sole member." I looked at him. 4 entities, 0 mention of Magnus Kerr. "The legal structure isn't complicated, Roman. It's exactly what you designed it to be." Derek stepped forward. "Magnus, you don't understand the tax implications of... Borsa der Derek," I said. And I said it the way I'd say the name of a structural deficiency on an inspection report. Flat, factual, diagnostic. "You have a degree in sports management from a school I won't embarrass you by naming, and you've been VP of operations for 2 years without learning the difference between a load-bearing wall and a partition wall. Don't talk to me about tax implications. Someone in the crew behind me made a sound. Not a laugh exactly, but an exhale. Derek's face went red. He looked at Roman. Roman didn't look back. I turned to tab 3. These are permit records from Cook County, DuPage County, and Will County. 112 permit applications filed under my professional engineer license number over the past 5 years. I personally authorized and supervised 34 of them. The remaining 78 were filed without my knowledge, without my authorization, and without my review of the structural work they certified. I paused. Every one of those unauthorized filings is a violation of Illinois licensing law. Everyone put my professional license at risk. Everyone generated revenue for you. Roman's face had drained. The florid, confident color, that was his default, the ruddiness of a man who ate well and slept well and believed the world would always arrange itself to his liking, was gone. In its place was something gray and pulled. I didn't know about all of those, Roman said. Derek handles the permit submissions now. If there were errors, there weren't errors, I said. There was a system that used my name and my credentials to generate business you never told me about and never shared with me. I pulled a sheet from the financial section. You billed clients $185 per permit for PE certification processing. That's a fee for using my license. I never authorized it. I never received any portion of it. Roman shifted tactics. I watched it happen. The recalculation, the selection of a new approach. His shoulders dropped slightly. His voice softened. Magnus, you're right. I should have been more transparent. I should have brought you in on the financial side sooner. But everything I've done for this family, for Tessa, for those boys. If I made mistakes in how I structured things, I haven't gotten to the structure yet, I said. I turned to the property section. D.R. Volkov Holdings LLC owns a commercial lot on Higgins Road in Schaumburg, valued at approximately $680,000. This property was used as collateral for a $400,000 equipment loan that you asked me to co-sign 3 months ago. A loan that would have made me personally liable for debt secured by an asset I didn't know existed, owned by an entity I had no interest in. Roman said nothing. His mouth opened and closed once. And this is where Sal comes in, I said. I turned to Sal. Sal stepped forward. He was carrying his own folder, the manila one from the diner. So, Roman, Sal said, and the way he said the name carried 14 years of weight. I brought the bank records from 2008 and 2009. The ones your lawyer said didn't exist. The ones that show $340,000 in transfers from the company account to your personal account over 18 months. The ones that prove you did to me exactly what you're doing to Magnus. Roman's face changed again. Not gray now. Something closer to green. He looked at Sal the way you'd look at a ghost, or at a structural failure you thought you'd patched over. The look of a man seeing something from his past that he'd buried and believed would stay buried. Sal, that was a dispute between partners. It was resolved. It was resolved because you outspent me in court, Sal said. It was resolved because you told everyone in the industry I was a thief and I couldn't get work. It was resolved because I ran out of money before you ran out of lies. I let that land. I let the silence sit for 5 seconds. The workers were motionless. Derek was staring at his shoes. Karen Oshiro had moved closer, her pen still, her eyes on Roman. Then I picked up my phone and pressed play on the Bluetooth speaker. Roman's voice filled the job site. Clear, casual, confident. The voice of a man speaking to his son in what he believed was total privacy. Let Magnus keep grinding. We'll transfer everything once he finishes the Naperville contract, then cut him loose. The dumb gringo did all the work for us. The words landed on the job site like a physical impact. I watched the workers' faces change. These were men and women who had worked alongside me, who had seen me on site at 6 in the morning and still there at 7 at night, who had watched me solve problems and carry loads and build something real. Many of them were immigrants themselves, or children of immigrants, or people who understood in their bones what it meant to hear your employer call you the dumb gringo behind your back, while smiling at you across the dinner table. I played it again. The second time I watched Roman's face. He had the look of a man standing in a building that is coming down around him and trying to decide which wall to brace against. His mouth was a thin line. His eyes were wet. Not with remorse, but with the involuntary, physiological response of a man whose body has registered catastrophe before his mind has formulated a strategy. C'est chop. Tessa heard this recording yesterday, I said, on the family iPad that you set up and forgot was synced to your phone. That's when Roman's last defense collapsed. Not the evidence, not the permits, not Sal, not the LLCs. Tessa. The knowledge that his daughter had heard him speak about her husband, the father of her children, as disposable labor to be used and discarded. The knowledge that the one person in his life whose loyalty he'd taken for granted, the way he took mine, Tessa, his firstborn, his little girl, now knew what he'd been saying about her family when he thought no one was listening. Roman's voice broke. I didn't mean it the way it sounds. Which part? I said. The part where you said cut him loose? Or the part where you called me a dumb gringo? Because the rest of the voicemail is pretty clear about the restructuring plan. Transfer everything to Derek. Push me out. Let me keep grinding until the last profitable project is signed off. And then discard me the way you discarded Sal. Magnus, please, I'm your family. Yeah, you're not my family, I said. And I said it quietly, which made it worse. You're a man who saw a kid whose father left and recognized that as an opportunity. You saw the hole in me, Roman. You saw how badly I wanted a family. And you used it. For 9 years, you used it. Karen Ashiro stepped forward. She introduced herself. She stated her role. She informed Roman that the Department of Financial and Professional Regulation had opened an investigation into the unauthorized use of PE license number 062073921, my number, on permit applications filed by Volkov Construction Group and its affiliated entities. She informed him that his contractor's license was subject to emergency suspension pending the outcome of the investigation. She informed him that the matter had been referred for potential civil penalties and that criminal referral was under evaluation. Roman looked at Karen the way a drowning man looks at the horizon. Not with hope, but with the recognition that the horizon is very far away. Derek, who had been silent since I'd shut him down, took out his phone. His hands were shaking. He was texting someone. Probably a lawyer. Probably the wrong one. A worker near the back of the crowd, a foreman I'd worked with for 6 years named Luis, said loud enough for everyone to hear. I always wondered why Derek's name was on paperwork. He couldn't read. Someone else laughed. Derek put his phone away. I closed the binder. I looked at Roman one more time. He was smaller than I'd ever seen him. Not physically, but in the way that matters. The bigness, the warmth, the barrel-chested confidence that had drawn me in 14 years ago. It was gone. What was left was a 70-year-old man standing in a hard hat in the middle of a job site surrounded by people who now knew exactly what he was. I'm taking the Naperville project, I said. My name is on every permit, every structural certification, every engineering document. The project exists because of my work. The 40 people standing here built it. You're going to sign a transfer of project management authority to me by end of business today, or the first call I make tomorrow morning is to every active client in the Volkov portfolio, and I tell them exactly whose license has been keeping their building standing and whose name is on the door for no reason. Roman didn't answer. He turned and walked toward his truck. Derek followed him. They got in and sat there for a long time. I could see them through the windshield, not talking, not looking at each other, just sitting in the cab of a black Silverado in a gravel parking lot, while their empire dismantled itself in real time. The days that followed had the quality of controlled demolition. The state board's emergency suspension of Roman's contractor license took effect 48 hours after the site confrontation. Without an active license, Volkov Construction Group couldn't pull permits, couldn't certify work, couldn't operate. Derek's VP title became a nameplate on a door that nobody walked through. 3 major clients called me within the first 2 days. Henderson Commercial Group, the Palatine retail developer, the Aurora mixed-use project. Each conversation followed the same pattern. They'd heard about the licensing suspension. They wanted to know if Magnus Kerr was still available, and they wanted him, specifically him to take over their projects independently. The calls came to my personal cell phone because that was the number they'd always used. That was the relationship they'd always had. Not with Volkov Construction, with me. The $400,000 equipment loan that Roman had tried to get me to co-sign was flagged by the bank the following week. My refusal to sign had already stalled it, but the licensing investigation triggered a review of the collateral. The Higgins Road property under DR, Volkov Holdings LLC, and the bank discovered that the property's ownership chain included discrepancies with the representations Roman had made on the loan application. Fraudulent collateral. The bank froze the application and opened its own review. Roman tried the narrative. Of course he did. He called family members. He called industry contacts. He told a version of events in which Magnus Kerr, his ungrateful son-in-law, had turned on the family that gave him everything. He told people I'd stolen clients. He told people I'd manufactured the permit records. He told people Sal Vecchio was a convicted fraud. Sal had never been charged with anything. And that I was being manipulated. It didn't work. It didn't work because I had the binder. And the binder had everything. When Roman called Tessa's uncle, Tessa called him first and played the voicemail. When Roman called the Palatine developer, I emailed the developer the permit records showing my license on every project they'd contracted for. When Roman told an industry contact that Sal was a fraud, Sal sent the contact the 2009 bank records and the settlement agreement that proved Roman had paid Sal to go away. You don't pay someone to go away if they're the one who stole from you. The narrative collapsed because the evidence was airtight. I hadn't confronted Roman with anger. I'd confronted him with a binder organized in tabbed sections with supporting documentation for every claim. I'd confronted him with a state investigator present. I'd confronted him with a witness who could testify to a 14-year pattern. There was no crack in the case for Roman's version to fit through. Derek disappeared from the industry within a month. His title was gone. His access to the entity accounts was frozen pending the investigation. His LinkedIn profile changed from VP of Operations Volkov Construction Group to no title at all. I heard through the crew, that he'd taken a sales job at a car dealership in Naperville. I didn't feel satisfaction about that. I felt the specific weariness of a man who had trained someone to replace him without knowing that was the plan. Gloria called Tessa and cried and said she didn't know. Tessa believed her, and I think that was probably true. Gloria had been living in her own version of Roman's architecture. The version where her husband was a generous patriarch, building a legacy for his family. When the architecture came down, Gloria was standing in the rubble too. The napkin. The worn cocktail napkin that had lived in my wallet for 9 years. After the confrontation, after I'd slid it across the table at the job site, as the first piece of evidence, it went into the binder. Section 1, page 1. I didn't keep it in my wallet anymore. It had served its purpose, not as a promise, which is what I'd thought it was, but as evidence, which is what it actually was. Proof that Roman had made a specific, written commitment and then systematically violated it for nearly a decade. I took the napkin out of the binder one last time, a few weeks after everything settled. I was sitting in my truck in the parking lot of the Schaumburg Public Library. The same library where I'd first pulled the LLC filings. I held the napkin in my hands and looked at Roman's handwriting. To Magnus, future owner. The ink had faded. The paper was soft from years of being pressed against my body, warmed by my own heat, carried everywhere I went like a prayer. I folded it and put it in an envelope and put the envelope in a box in the garage. Not thrown away, not framed, archived. A piece of evidence from a closed case. Sal and I met at the diner in Elmhurst again, 2 weeks after the confrontation. Same booth. He ordered the same thing, coffee and a turkey club. I ordered pancakes because I hadn't eaten a real breakfast in weeks, and my body was finally starting to recover from the sustained adrenaline of the masquerade. You did it cleaner than I could have, Sal said. I went in angry and got buried. You went in prepared. I went in prepared because of you, I said. You're the one who said not yet. You're the one who held me back. Sal looked at his coffee. I spent 14 years wondering what would have happened if I'd had someone to tell me to wait, to build the case, to let the evidence do the work instead of my emotions. He looked up. You had someone. That's the difference. We talked about forming a firm together. Sal had maintained his contractor's license. I had my PE certification. Between his field experience and my engineering credentials, we could handle anything Volkov Construction had been doing and do it without the shadow entity structure, without the stolen permits, without the lies. We shook hands across the table. Not a contract, just a handshake between two men who'd survived the same storm. 3 months have passed. I'm sitting in a rented office in Palatine that Sal and I signed the lease on 6 weeks ago. It's not much. 2 desks, a shared printer, a coffee pot that makes coffee that tastes like it was filtered through a construction boot. But my PE license is on the wall, framed, next to our business registration that lists both our names. Both our names. I look at it every morning. The state investigation into Roman is ongoing. His contractor's license remains suspended. The civil penalty assessment hasn't been finalized, but the investigators have indicated it will be substantial. The unauthorized use of a PE license on 78 projects across 3 counties is not a gray area. It's a clear, documented, sustained violation, and the state board is treating it as such. Tessa and I are still married. That wasn't automatic. There were weeks when the space between us in bed felt like a canyon. When she looked at me, and I could see the shame she felt for her father's actions, even though none of it was her doing. We started seeing a counselor. A woman in Arlington, Sykes-Sur. Who specializes in ikinen in family systems disrupted by financial betrayal. Tessa has not spoken to Roman since the voicemail. She has spoken to Gloria, carefully, with boundaries that didn't exist before. We're building something, Tessa and I. Not the same thing we had. Something that has been stress tested and survived. Caleb, my 11-year-old, had a basketball game last week. I was in the front row. He looked up into the stands and found my face immediately, the kind of automatic scan a kid does, checking that the person who's supposed to be there is there. I raised my hand. He nodded, a small, serious nod. The nod of a boy who is learning that presence matters more than promises. Owen, my 8-year-old, sat next to me for the first quarter before running off to sit with his friends. He leaned against my arm before he left. A brief, warm pressure that carried more information than 1,000 words. I called Caleb after the Naperville confrontation, sitting alone in my truck while the site cleared. I said, "I'll be at every game from now on." He said, "Okay, Dad." Just that. "Okay, Dad." But the way he said it, the quiet relief in his voice, the absence of surprise, as if he'd been waiting for me to say it and had decided not to ask, told me everything about the cost of the years I'd spent building someone else's company instead of being present in my own sons' lives. I don't celebrate what happened. There's nothing to celebrate. 9 years of my professional life were spent enriching a man who saw me as a tool. My engineering license was used without my consent on buildings I never inspected, creating liabilities I didn't know existed. The father-in-law I loved, and I did love him, that's the part that still hurts, looked at me across his own dinner table every Sunday and saw not a son, but a resource to be extracted. But I found the truth. That matters. Not because the truth makes you feel good. It doesn't. Not at first. Not for a long time. But because living inside a lie is a kind of structural failure that only gets worse with time. The longer you inhabit a building with a compromised foundation, the more catastrophic the eventual collapse. I found the cracks. I documented them. I condemned the structure, and then I walked out and started building on solid ground. Studies show that nearly 68% of family business disputes involve verbal promises that were never formalized in writing. And in contested estate or partnership cases, 71% of outcomes hinge on the quality of documentary evidence presented. I was lucky, or maybe I was trained. My engineering mind, the same systematic thinking that Roman exploited for 9 years, became the tool I used to dismantle his deception. He built his empire on my skills, and in the end, those same skills took it apart. I used to believe that loyalty was enough, that if you showed up every day, worked harder than anyone, gave more than you took, the people you loved would honor that. I was wrong. Loyalty without verification is just labor. Trust without documentation is just hope. And hope, when it's aimed at someone who doesn't deserve it, is the most expensive investment you'll ever make. If you're listening to this and you recognize something, a promise that keeps sliding forward, a structure that never quite includes your name, a family that takes your work and calls it love, then I'm not going to tell you what to do. You already know. You've known for a while. The question isn't whether the cracks are there. The question is whether you're ready to document them. This story has been told. One worn napkin carried in a wallet for 9 years. One voicemail on a synced iPad that was never meant to be heard. And one binder, 4 pounds heavy, laid open on a stack of lumber in front of 40 people who deserve the truth. If you've ever carried a promise that turned out to be a tool someone used to keep you working, tell me about it in the comments. I read everyone. Subscribe. If this is the kind of story that makes you check the paperwork on the things you've been taking on faith.